let's talk about these anti-inflammatory drugs next. Anti-inflammatory drugs are probably going to have a very similar effect on your recovery to extreme cold. Extreme cold is anti-inflammatory. Obviously, anti-inflammatory drugs are anti-inflammatory. You're commonly going to see these written as NSAIDs, or non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, NSAID, NSAIDs. Probably the most common one that athletes are going to be taking if they are feeling sore or tired or achy after exercise or anything like that is going to be like ibuprofen or Advil. And so that's kind of what I'm going to be talking about as this goes, but there are definitely other varieties of these NSAIDs. Well, the way that these NSAIDs work is that they block the production of something called cyclooxygenase, or that is abbreviated as COX, C-O-X. Now, there's different types of COX enzymes, but what this COX is that it is a precursor to something called a prostaglandin, which is inflammatory. And so when we take these non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, they're going to block the release, or the production, I should say, of these inflammatory hormones. Now, really, athletes should not be taking NSAIDs super regularly anyways. If you're having some, even just 200 to 400 milligrams of ibuprofen daily, that's not something I'm going to recommend that you do every single day, but I know that some athletes do. But you should know that these prostaglandins that are inflammatory, they do have other roles in the body, including the mucous membrane of the stomach, which is why sometimes if people are taking too much of these NSAIDs or ibuprofen or aspirin, it can actually lead to getting a stomach ulcer, because these prostaglandins that are being blocked play a role in the production of the mucus lining for the stomach, where the mucus lining is going to recede back and the stomach acid can actually burn the stomach and cause ulcers. So for that case, it's already probably not a great idea for athletes to be dependent on these NSAIDs, but these prostaglandins can actually be very, very desirable in the post-exercise recovery sense. Now, these prostaglandins can actually signal to the body to release stem cells and satellite cells. It can signal for a lot of physiologically beneficial processes to occur that are going to lead to us getting bigger, faster, and stronger. Same with cold. NSAIDs, it's the same exact thing. This inflammation can actually be good in these post-exercise recovery senses. A lot of people just hear inflammation and it's a buzzword to them. But inflammation is not always bad. Yeah, if we're over-inflamed, that's going to be bad. But you don't just want no amounts of inflammation. And especially in the context of post-exercise recovery, inflammation is going to be pretty desirable in a lot of ways. And if we blunt that response to the use of things like NSAIDs, then we're not going to be recovering to the way that we want to. So this is actually going to be bad for post-exercise recovery. Now, again, this is something that's gotten a lot more traction recently, so it might be an idea that you're already familiar with. But things like cold and NSAIDs are just not going to be desirable for post-exercise recovery. Now, when they might be beneficial for is after an athletic event or after a game. Some great examples of this are, first of all, like a baseball pitcher. We know that the pitcher in baseball, obviously there's a lot of strain on the shoulder joint of the pitcher. And so a lot of pitchers are only given a certain time window to be the pitcher, and then they get traded out so that they don't, injure their shoulder, and they always try and take, as best care as they possibly can to recover their shoulder. Another good example is like if you've ran a marathon or an ultra marathon, well, then that is your performance day. That kind of exceeds any sort of an exercise response that you got during training. And now that was your race day. You're all done. And now you're probably going to be feeling pretty tired and miserable and sore. And you're going to want to recover from that just so you can get back to your normal life. And another great example is that of things like contact sports like football, or combat sports like MMA or boxing, things where you might actually be injured. Then something like cold water immersion and NSAIDs can actually be very, very beneficial in this context, because Well, you've done something that goes beyond your normal training stimulus, and so you want to get back. You want to get off of the soreness and the fatigue, and again, in some cases, the injuries that have occurred during this race day or game day, and you want to actually be able to just get back into your training. So, cold baths and ibuprofen, after you've competed or after your race day, I think could actually be very, very beneficial, just so that you can kind of reset and get back to your baseline so that you can pick up your training where you left off instead of being exceptionally or in some cases uniquely sore post game day, post race day. So although these things should be avoided in conjunction with training, in conjunction with performance and game day performance, it could be very, very beneficial.